For my thesis, I had the unique opportunity to conduct research out in Yakima, Washington. While there, I collaborated with Julia Stringfellow at the Central Washington University Library, Mike Siebel, the chief curator at the Yakima Valley Museum, and I conducted informal interviews with Hollyanna Cougar Tracks Dakota Little Bull, a fourth generation Native American artisan. I visited the Washington State History Museum in Seattle, the Mary Hill Art Museum in Goldendale, and two other local establishments in Yakima that act at quasi-museums, the Miners Drive-In Restaurant and the Bulbully's Gun and Pawn Shop. The purpose of my trip was to explore, examine, and draw attention to the Native American fashion accessory known as the Plateau Beaded bag. These bags are more than consumer products, more than fancy accessories, and more than just artifacts sitting in a museum. According to Little Bull, these bags celebrate the Yakima women and contribute to what is known as cultural noise. Let's try to get that. What is cultural noise? Cultural noise is a culture of making things. According to Little Bull, just being around it, she said, watching my mom, aunts, grandparents, and uncles, that is how I learned. And when kids are exposed to all the cultural background noise, it quietly inspires them to want to be makers also. Here are Little Bull's cultural noise. On the left is Isabella Craig, her great-grandmother. The center is Amanda French Watlement, her grandmother. And on the right, that's her mother's, Aline Watlement Dakota. And then there's Hollyanna Cougar Tracks Dakota Little Bull showing her beaded bag. These fashion accessories are rooted in the past as demonstrated in the museum exhibit that celebrates the indigenous cultures of the Columbian River Plateau. It combined historical items and photographs alongside contemporary works of art from three women artisans, Leanne Campbell, Bernadine Phillips, and Hollyanna Cougar Tracks Dakota Little Bull. Each of these women credits their ability to create beadwork to having been taught by their grandmother. The horse on the right is dressed with all the beadwork done by Little Bull, which includes a beaded bag hanging from the saddle horn. Listen to how she explains the process she uses. During my trip, I did have the opportunity to visit other museums in the area and look at their beaded bags on display. However, due to the COVID-19 regulations, they were unable to admit me inside their storage area. But the Yakima Valley Museum was the only one that granted me permission. This museum has a vast 65,000 square foot building and houses 150 plateau beaded bags with 64 of them on display. I examined 48 of them during this process. The exhibits speak of the creativity of the Yakima people and provide insight into how the museum built up their collection through the generosity of donors, local establishments, and gifts from individual people. The objects not on display are stored in the back storage area, off limits to the public, and housed inside large metal storage units designed to protect them from the dangers of light, dust, and insects. To understand the material culture of the bags, I followed the step-by-step processes of Jules David Prawn, beginning with the physical examination of the objects, including what he refers to as sensory engagement, taking photographs of the bags, measuring them, looking inside them. I also had access to the museum database, and I even held them in my hands with gloves on. To make sense and bring organization to all the information gathered from my observations, I turned to Stuart Hall's work on representation and looked for similarities and differences. I created an Excel spreadsheet where each line represents one of the bags. I started with the general information provided by the museum, the catalog number, donor, manufacture date, area of origin. Then I looked at the materials. I broke down the bag into 3 parts: the back panel, the lining, and the bias or binding. Recording the types of fabric I saw and noting any represented elements such as prints and colors, plus any fringe or shells at the bottom. I included the provenance history, any special notes from the records, because that data provided the narrative for the bags. The items I found inside the bags provided insight to the life purposes. These are my interpretations of what they were used for: raffles, prizes, gifts, and in art exhibits. Here are the results of the fabric. The back were constructed out of wool, buckskin, velvet, and corduroy. 2 of them had beadwork done on both sides, and 2 of them had an additional embroidery patterns. Several buckskins were smoked. That meant additional steps were taken after the rawhide was cleaned and stretched. The smoke would permeate the skin and bring out a broad range of brown colors. The lining consists of 2 pieces of fabric, cut in the same size and stitched together. The purpose was to hide and protect the stitchwork and serve as a pocket to store objects. There's no definitive answers about what went inside the bags, and according to Littleball, the bags typically were used to store personal items or necessities, even clothing. Looking closer at 2 women that had bags in the collection, Josephine Smartlawat made a bag with beaded panels on both the front and the back, and it has a long fringe at the bottom. It's lined with a dark damask fabric, has buckskin binding, and a handle. To make the fringe, one would cut an extra piece of buckskin to the desired length and place it between the front and back panels, then sew them all together. The fringe would be cut from the inside, and the bag would be turned right side out, each of those strips moistened by the mouth, twisted or rolled across her thigh. This feature would create that additional movement when dancing or riding on a horse. Katie Perriette made 4 bags, and each one displays a different pattern, size, and from different decades. She incorporated various trims. Up close, you can see evidence of copying or mimicking maybe European lace patterns. But why are these beads important to the world of fashion? These plateau beaded bags are visual reminders of the social and economic history, and they also showcase the evolutionary growth of fashion and taste of the Yakima women. Their taste to incorporate elements of nature, plants, or flowers, even geometric shapes. They also document family stories. For example, this buckskin bag was donated by Glenn Hular. It's lined with a cotton plaid fabric, has 2 buckskin handles, and displays skillful work of additional beadwork. First, the image on the front panel depicts a tan cougar with a curled tail biting into the back of a blue elk with gray antlers, all done on a white background. The designer used those red beads to represent the drops of blood coming out of a wound. The bias has a finish which is called a barber pole effect, or rolled edge beadwork. According to Joel Montour in his book, The Complete Guide to Traditional Native American Beadwork, he believes it creates a solid, firm border around the edge. Finally, that buckskin fringe has additional faceted beads, 3 red and 1 white. According to Arthur Woodward, on his work, Indian Trade Goods, he said that these beads were used to reflect the light better than any other beads. Some bags provided insight into the fashion worn by both men and women, including their jewelry and hairstyles. Here are 3 in the collection that depict the styles of the Yakima people. Two bags document the value of the objects for economic purposes. For example, look at the bag with the male rider sitting on the yellow horse. He's wearing leather chaps, a black hat, and a red scarf tied around his neck. This bag was sold at the community rodeos. The yellow bag on the bottom displays flowers, leaves, and an elk. This was used in a community activity known as games of chance or in gambling. Games played a big role in Native American community life, both as entertainment or sport, but also used for means to earn extra cash. These beaded bags circulated throughout the region through games of chance or gambling. Notice the woman sitting in a circle, actively playing a game. She's kneeling, her arm is clicked up, signaling a bet for her beaded bags laying on the ground or on her leg. The museum also includes gambling sticks within their exhibit and houses many of other items in the back storage area. I also found other outside influences that circulated the Native American fashions. These three photographers listed here worked to narrate the culture of the Yakima people. The photo on the right was taken by Thomas H. Rutter, and it depicts two females. The one sitting down was identified as Kadena Chenoweth. She has on a two-piece outfit that consists of a blouse with a pleated front panel, leg of mutton sleeves, high collar trimmed with lace. She's wearing a full-length skirt in a bold pattern and holds a fringed shawl in her lap. The unidentified woman standing up next to her has a tailored button-down dress made from striped fabric with similar shaped sleeves and high collar. But notice over her arm rests a beaded bag. This portrait demonstrates the blending of European fashions with Native American traditions. For example, the photograph on the left was Chief White Swan, who was a prominent leader of the Yakima people. It was taken around 1900. In this image, the chief has on a tailored men's suit jacket and vest with collared shirt made from a striped fabric, and he wears a feathered hat on his head and a wide sash with rosette over his shoulder. The Yakima Valley Museum has two plateau beaded bags in their collection that represent his family heritage. This image represents Little Bull's grandmother, taken by great-grandmother, by Edward S. Stewart in 1900. She's riding a horse, and both are displaying handmade attire completed with beadwork. Although the photographs use these images for profit, today Little Bull and other descendants of the portrait sitters are using these images to remember and extend their family heritage. Another group that worked to circulate fashions in the past was the Hudson Bay Fur Company. The fur trappers provided the beads for their wives to decorate clothing, moccasins, and other accessories. Then they would transport those items up and down trade routes. Along those routes, the traders would set up rendezvous, or as Steve Graffy, author and chief curator of Maryhill Museum in Goldendale, Washington, said, great centers for exchange of commercial goods and native arts. He also noted that these beaded garments at these centers would reflect the fine example of arts and crafts for the proud tribesmen. In this photograph taken in 1910, it shows the inside of the Hudson Bay Fur Company store, located in Seattle, Washington. The floors are covered in layers of carpet. The walls are lined with woven baskets and pottery. And inside the glass cabinets, the shelves are filled with a variety of curio objects to market and sell the Native American lifestyle, including beaded bags, like this one from the museum, with its original price tag for $8. One question that came up during the process was, what does the red wool trade cloth represent? Why is it important? In my paper, I compared and analyzed 3 beaded bags, all made out of red wool background, and wrote up their similarities and differences. The Yakima Valley Museum bag was not on display, but stored in the back. The Mary Hill Art Museum was inside the case with beaded bags, but the Central Washington University Museum, I could only access their information from their website. But Larry Schooner suggests that it may have been a sign of wealth. But the Washington State History Museum highlighted beaded dress made from this red wool fabric, and the museum exhibit included enlarged historical photographs of women wearing them. Little Bull paid particular attention to one of the dresses because it's part of her family lineage. Listen to what she says about the importance of this fabric. Another question that came up during the examination of the beadwork: what is a signature bead? Signature beads are adding a different colored bead to the area having the same color. Sometimes they would be found in the background or in a pattern, and there's no definitive location nor number of signature beads required. All of these decisions are left up to the individual creator. Little Bull commented on the practice of mixing beads was sometimes necessary to complete a project because they probably didn't have enough of one color. Mike Siebel explained that a signature bead as one color out of place so they can identify their beaded bags. But both of them believe that only their creator can make things perfect. Therefore, they would deliberately add an imperfect bead to designs. Little Bull signs her work with a beaded cross. This is her family signature. The Yakima people would not copy each other's patterns nor repeat anyone else's signature. They do not share patterns with each other. Little Bull also incorporated a sunflower design in this cuff. You look closely there. That demonstrates her skill for pattern work, and it holds a special meaning to her. The sunflower represents the oldest daughter with her head hanging down, watching over young children, siblings, and cousins. Little Bull is that person in her family. There are 2 other voices that I heard that were working in the community to display the Native American fashions today. First is the Miners Drive-In Restaurant, best known for their large burgers and fries. Here are several photographs taken from inside the dining area of the restaurant. A large glass exhibit, a family of Native American mannequins, all dressed up, wearing a mixture of various cultural clothing, and in the background, there are artifacts of dresses, vests, and bags. The miners are private collectors with a large inventory of Native American goods that they buy from people from the community. I did notice their names in various books that I used in my research. Another location is the Bulbully's Gun and Pawn Shop. This is their new trading post. This business not only provides a quick influx of cash, but also serves as a safe location to store their Native American heirlooms. According to Gene, one of the knowledgeable staff members there, he mentioned that there's a number of pieces in the back not available to the public that have been there since the store opened 10 years ago. They're there for the family. Gene had a particular good understanding about beadwork, showing me countless examples of bags that had cut, polished, or pony beads. And here is a bag that I purchased. Feel free to look at it after the presentation. Meet Hollyanna Cougar Tracks, Dakota Little Bull. During my stay in Yakima, we were invited to an estate sale by Sally Fitch, a local artist in the area. At that location, there were several large tables displaying a variety of jewelry, fabric, and clothing, including bags of loose beads for sale. That's where Little Bull spent the majority of her time perusing the wares carefully before making her selection. Little Bull wound up with a great deal. Apparently, she had bartered for a whole bag of skunk beads for a fraction of the cost of one single bead. She enjoys going to antique shows and thrift shops looking for objects with Native American beadwork. She enjoys removing them and sewing them into something new. This process allows her to obtain valuable materials while at the same time giving the beads a second chance. Museums also contribute to her cultural noise. She goes there to examine, explore, and study pieces inside the local museums and has a working relationship with Mike Siebel. He allows her to come in and study the items up close in the back storage area. Little Bull represents her Yakima culture not only with her hands, but she uses her voice to speak up for equality, preservation, and education. There's power not just in making traditional crafts, but in her words. Little Bull, as an educator of the Shapateen language, designed and implemented a curriculum for younger people using an eagle, bear, coyote, and a porcupine as stuffed animals to illustrate her lessons. She includes a series of activities and coloring books to help them learn that language. In the future, she hopes to publish a graphic novel about Bigfoot. She constructs value judgments about the beads before incorporating them into her art, and that judgment is based on her knowledge, experience, and taste. This red beaded bag bonnet highlights her creative use of mixing elements, different colored beads, feathers, layers of patterns, and her advanced beadwork is definitely on display here. And as of 2022, the Washington History Museum incorporated this bonnet into their permanent collection. The Plateau beaded bags celebrate the fashion of the Yakima people, and with the help of the museum, the cultural noise continues. Here's what they look like. At first, I began to listen to the voices of the past that speak of the trading practices and fashioning systems, looking at historical photographs that all work together to formulate the public opinion and project the consumerism for Native American fashions. Then examine how the museums curate the history of the beaded bags and work to preserve them for future generations. Finally, looking at two commercial establishments in the city that narrate today's story and fashions. All the while infusing Hollyanna Cougar tracks, Dakota Little Bull's voice, her cultural noise throughout my process. I hope you enjoyed this presentation.